your emergency contact? Who should we notify in the case of death? Welcome to the USP, where I spent the last 2+ decades of my life. I first got arrested. They put me in Davis County, then they transferred me to Old Metro. Old Metro is a jail down here in downtown Salt Lake, and Old Metro is known as the dungeon. You get put in a 14, 16-man tank, and it's sink or swim. There's no guards. There's nothing. You got, on each section, on each floor, you got 6, 7, 8 pods. You got one CO in the corner by the elevator. So, needless to say, when you're getting smashed out, there's nobody coming there to save you. You can scream and holler and all the rest of it. But when you start screaming, the cells next to you, they just start banging on the wall like they're watching sports or football or soccer or something, and they drown out your cries, right? I tell people, like, one of the eeriest sounds that you can never get out of your head is when you hear a grown man screaming, begging for his life. And that doesn't go away. You learn to compartmentalize things and put them in their respective boxes. You don't have time to process what you're seeing, what you're hearing. Because if you sit in your cell and you think about all the craziness that goes on around you, all the craziness that you see, all the craziness that you hear, you're probably going insane. Just like if you're sitting there hard timing, thinking about the years that you got ahead of you that you're supposed to do, that shit gonna drive you to off yourself. I've seen it so many times with dudes that come through. I mentioned that I had a dude named Blue. He was from the Sundowner, a biker gang out here. He had we both caught the plane to Lompoc together. He ended up having, I don't know, maybe 40, 60 years. But he was already in his 40s, maybe even early 50s at the time. And we both went end up in Lompoc. But, through the conversation I had with him, he was just like, man, I'm not doing this time. They ain't getting this out of me, So he went and proceeded to, OD and moved on from this life, right? But you have a lot of dudes that do that. Like, it's hard to wrap your mind around the years that you're given. When I was first fighting my case, there's dudes that's coming back to court from the feds because they got new indictments and all that stuff, and they're like, man, if you get 5 years, you lucked out, right? If you get 10 years, that's love. If you get 15, you still doing good. And me, the most time I've done leading up to my last case was almost 3 years. So I'm looking at these dudes, I'm like, man, how is 10 years love, right? That's 10 years of your life. But then as I fight my case and I'm seeing the numbers that are coming down, 20, 30, 60, double life sentences, plus 100 years. And I'm just like, whoa, what the fuck, right? So when my homeboys caught the RICO in 2006, I was sitting in Beaumont waiting to see if I was going to get indicted on the RICO with them. My lawyer had represented one of my homeboy, Monkey, and when she went to court to represent him, the prosecutor, her name was Lisa Lee Dickinson, she had she had jumped up and said, hey, there's a conflict of interest. Deirdre Gorman, who is my attorney, she's like, Deirdre Gorman can't represent this guy. She represented Mesa as a conflict of interest. So my lawyer was like, well, and at this time, she's no longer my lawyer. She's just a friend, you know. She helped me on my appeal. She didn't represent me on my trial, but my trial lawyer disappeared. He up and moved his family out of state because he thought there was going to be some retribution on how he fucked my case over, right? But for me, at the time being young, I thought the dude was representing me to the best of his ability. But it turned out he cold-blooded set me up, right? So when I went to Lompoc, I'm trying to file my appeal. Now, once you lose your trial, your appeal is the only way you can get back. Without your appeal, you got no way to get back into court. I'm trying to locate my attorney. His name is Ron Jorgensen, and I don't get no response. I'm calling the public defender's office, and nobody knows where this motherfucker's at. So finally, my friend Charles Freeman, the one that was helping me fight my case, he said, man, we just put in a motion for a new attorney and asked Deirdre to represent you, to be appointed to you. So the judge granted that motion. She appointed Deirdre Gorman to represent me, and she proceeded to go look for this dude Jorgensen, my trial lawyer, and we couldn't find him. For 6 months, we couldn't find him, and finally it turned out that he had moved all his family out to Virginia, and he told my attorney that he was afraid of my homeboys was going to do something to him because of how my case turned out, right? But for somebody to do that, they have to have a guilty conscience, because if I represented you to the best of my ability, if I conducted myself with integrity, then I shouldn't have no worries. Because if somebody comes up like, hey man, what happened? Hey man, I did everything I could do. There was just no way to win this case, and move on with your life. But when you know you've done something foul, that's where that guilty conscience comes. That's the same thing in everything you do. When you're doing things because you feel it's for the right reason, when you're doing things that you believe in, no matter how crazy it get, no matter what it is that you have to do, when you have that belief that you're doing the right thing, that helps protect your psyche. But when you're out there being a douchebag, stabbing your homies in the back or fucking over somebody, then you have that guilty conscience that these people is going to come back one day to get you. So fast forward, I'm sitting over there in Beaumont, and I call my attorney, Deirdre Gorman, and she's like, yeah, I just got kicked off the case. It's a RICO case. It's a big case out here. And I'm like, what happened? She's like, well, they say it was a conflict of interest because I represented you. I said, yeah, but you're not even my attorney anymore. She goes, yeah, I know. I told them that. So I said, what's going on? Are they going to indict me? And she's like, I don't know. She didn't answer. She asked the prosecutor if I was going to be on the indictment, and the prosecutor never gave her an answer. So, I already got 26 years. Another 10 years going to put me in the dirt, right? So I'm sitting in Beaumont holding my nuts. And fortunately, it turned out that they didn't come and indict me because I've surpassed the 7-year threshold. They were still indicting some of my homies that was in the state, that was in the feds, because they had just got locked up, and they were still within that 7-year window frame. I'm calling home. to try, get some updates and what's going on and all the rest. All my homies are locked up. They indicted almost 30 something of them, right? Not everybody was from the hood or anything like that, but like throughout the whole indictment, there was 20 plus, maybe 30 something people, practically wiped us out from the streets. And when I'm calling home to get updates, one of the homies that's locked up, he's sending word to me, and he's like, man, we're going to take this shit to trial. He said, man, we're not a RICO case. We're not a criminal enterprise. We're just, a bunch of homies that grew up out here that banded together and started getting into shit. But we don't have no hierarchy. We don't have like, oh, this is the leader of the gang, and you got to pay taxes or put in money in a pot. You know what I mean? There was nothing organized about who we are. Everything that has to do with us is about respect. If the homie respect you, then they're gonna elevate you and listen to you and take your advice. If they don't respect you, no matter how old you are, no matter how long you're in the game, we ain't got no time for you. If you ain't out there doing what you're supposed to do as far as this life that we signed up for, as far as holding it down, then we ain't got nothing for you. So but there was never a hierarchy. Yeah, like the homies look at me now like I'm the big homie or something, but I'm not anybody's big homie, man. I'm just a brother, you know. And at the time, I thought I knew what I was doing, and I misled a lot of the young homies into a wreck. So, like right now, I'm just trying to find a way to redo some of that damage that I've done. But going back to the story, like, yeah, we're gonna go take her to trial, man, and because we're not a RICO case and we think we can beat it because none of the homies on the indictment was testifying to each other. We are, if only, we are maybe one of the only gangs that's ever been indicted that motherfucker wasn't falling over each other to tell on each other. You know, like regardless of how you feel about, some of the things that we've done or the life that we live, you gotta respect the homies. These youngsters, they stay solid. They really truly, the thing about us is that we really truly care about each other. We all grew up together. I've known some of these kids from when they were babies, from when we first came to America, you know. So when the shit hit the fan, all of them was holding their water. So the message comes back, and I send a message. I'm like, well, if you lose your trial, what are you facing, and what are they offering? So the word comes back that, well, if they lose their trial, they're probably gonna get anywhere between 20 to 30 years. But at the time, because nobody was testifying against anybody, they just wanted somebody to plead out to the body. The homie Lot, he was already serving a life sentence, a fight of life out here in the state for a body. And so when they indicted him, they charged him for the body again. But they said it wasn't double jeopardy because they weren't charging the homie for murder. They were charging him under the RICO Act with murder as an element. So it's not double jeopardy according to their definition, because you're not being charged for murder, even though we're trying to give you more time for the same body that you're already serving a sentence for. No, we're charging you under the RICO, but under the RICO, you have an element of murder in your case. So the word comes back, they were like, well, they just want somebody to plead out to the body. And if somebody takes the body, then the rest of them will get 10 years or less. So when I'm on the phone with the homie, I tell him, look, man, 10 years ain't shit. Because at this time I've been down almost 8, 9 years already, right? I said, look, I know it might seem long, 8, 9, 10 years might seem long, but It goes by quick. I've already done 8 already. If I were you, I'd get a hold of your lawyer and ask him to have a meeting with the homie. Because at the time, I'm still one of the older ones from the hood, and the homies respect me to guide them and give them the advice that I feel is best for them. You know, and also I've had the unfortunate circumstance of already going through it in the feds, so I already know what to expect. I already know what's coming, and I already know how these people operate. So my advice to them was sit down, have a meeting with the homie, and see what he does. So when they do that, and the homie lot said, yeah, he'll take the 30 years for the body. So he's already serving a fight of life in the state. When the feds indicted him, he agreed to take another 30 years so all the rest of the homies could go home. And all the rest of the homies, they end up with like 6 years, 4 years, 2 years, but they all really got out scot-free pretty much. Because, anything, like I said, when I was first hearing people coming back and they're like, oh, if you get 10 years, that's love. 15 is cool, 25 you can do. I'm just like, man, what the fuck world you guys live in? You guys don't understand how many years these things are? But once you're put in that box and you have no choice of getting out or any choice of the time you got, that 10 years becomes a blessing. And so the homie played out, whatever. Everybody got 6 years or under, and the homie got 30 years. He still got about 7 years left. This was in 2006. He just transferred to the feds a couple years ago, and we hear from him every now and then. He calls some of the homies, and we try to do what we can for him. The purpose of this video is to emphasize, what prison is really like. Like, you follow my stories and stuff, and some of them are entertaining and exciting and fun or whatever. But it's only entertaining if you're outside looking in. When you're watching something on TV and you got two groups of dudes, warriors, whether it be gangs or whether it be back in the days, the Viking days and whatever, Vietnam War and all that, it's exhilarating when you're seeing these people come in and they clash and chop each other up and all the rest. But if you're one of those soldiers, if you're one of them dudes on that front line, rushing towards a fucking wall of enemies is not as exciting, but not in like a good way. It's not entertaining. It's scary as hell. But when you survive it, like I have, then you're able to take some pride in being able to survive those chaos. And maybe even to a certain extent, brag about it a little bit and find some entertainment into it. But in those moments, there's absolutely nothing fun about it. Me, I don't, I can't fight. Like, I'm not no expert at any type of techniques or martial arts. I'm not a big dude, and I don't have that psychotic mentality that is just like, oh, let's just go. Like I tell you, every confrontation I get into, my heart races. My hand shakes a little bit, but like I said, but I don't ever allow those fears, those uncertainty win out, because I know that what I'm about to get into It's something that I have to do, something I have to deal with. And, for those that don't really understand that, you watch these movies, you hear these stories, and you think it's cool and exciting and all the rest, I'm here to tell you that, man, it's not, you know. And the worst days out here, the worst days out here, when I wake up and I'm not sure what to do, when I wake up and I'm not sure how we're gonna make rent this month, and I start processing those fucking thoughts about how I can get this, how I can get that, you know. I know where everything is in the valley, but then after those thoughts, I start processing the thoughts of leaving my wife behind. All the years that she waited for me. Then I start remembering how it felt sitting in those fucking cells, waiting for somebody to open the door so you can go out and get yourself a cup of coffee. And you start getting, all the emotions that you felt while you're in those cells start surfacing. And you get a rude awakening. And there's no way I'm gonna put myself in any situation that's gonna put me back in that hell. There's very few people that I've met that don't mind that life, being in the cell, being in prison. But I'm not one of them dudes. The 24 years that I just did put my dick in the dirt. I had a better time of it than most people. Like, outside of the few incidents I got into, I pretty much did my time the way I wanted to. I ran a poker game, I ran a dice game, I was a bookie, I always had food in my locker, and I was able to get whatever I needed to get on the yard. For those people that's come home and that's reached out to me on the comments and they tell me about, the things that they're still dealing with, I fully understand that. My first year out here was like the honeymoon period, and I was just excited to be out and do things and see things. Now reality is set in, and I'm dealing with life, and I find myself, starting to feel the effect of the last 2+ decades that I was in prison. And it pisses me off sometimes because, I've always been a person that feels like I can adapt, that I'm stronger than my circumstances. But sometimes it catches you off guard. And I don't act out. I don't act out externally, but in my mind, I'm steaming. You know what I mean? Not steaming that because of whatever it is that triggered it. I'm steaming because I realized that I wasn't able to leave that place unscathed, and that place has left some, deep scars in me. You know, but I'm fortunate to have the support system that I have out here with my wife and my friends and my family. And yeah, I want to encourage people that have been home that are trying to figure it out and trying to deal with these things that, find somebody to talk to, man. Whether that's a therapist or a friend, or your wife, it helps for you to verbalize it. Put it out there so it's not in here. Put it out. And I think part of the reasons I do these videos is that it helps me process the things that I've experienced for the last 20 something years. Because while you're in there, you don't have an opportunity to process anything. When you're walking to go get your laundry soap or whatever, and somebody's coming back, tell you, hey man, watch out for the puddle. You already know what it is. There's a body over there in the corner. So when you walk over there, you got to walk around the puddle. But you don't have time to. You can't look at the body. I mean, you do, but you look at it to make sure you don't step on it, to make sure you don't get your foot, blood on your shoes, and you keep going. You go pick up your your soap, whatever, your razor, and you come back. And when you get back, you don't have time to sit in your cell and be like, holy shit, I just saw this dude with his freaking, throat slit, or half his freaking head smashed out. Because you go back in your cell when you're like, damn, I just seen this dude's throat slit open, gushing out, blood coming out, this dude's head smashed. It's gonna drive you insane, man. So you don't have time to process it. You don't have time to deal with it. Your mind takes a photograph of it and you put it away. Because you still got to do 20 something years. You still got to do a life sentence. You ain't got time to worry about all that shit. But being home now, my body is starting to process that. And sometimes it gets scary. Not for me, but for my wife. Not that I'm doing anything, but just I space out and there's a look on my face, my demeanor, my impression or whatever, and she's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, well, no, nothing. Like, what's going on? She goes, you look really scary right now. And I'm not conscious that I'm doing these things, but but yeah, man, the worst days out here are 1,000 times better than the best day you could ever have behind those walls. And if you're ever considering, doing some things because you're running into some rough patches or because you think you can come up on something, I just want you to be conscious of where that can lead up to and the place that you can be put in. It doesn't matter how much time you get, whether it's 5 years, 20 years, or a life sentence. Once you're behind those walls, there's no guarantee that you're going to make it back. And there's absolutely no guarantee that you're going to make it back with your mind intact. Welcome to the USP.